All right, welcome everyone. My name's Amanda Demmer. I'm the Learning Specialist and Program Coordinator for Community-Based Research Canada, and I'll be moderating today's session. So this is our third event in a series on young people in community-based research, where we've been exploring different models and different examples of youth-engaged and youth-led community-based research. This presentation today is brought to you by CBRCanada. If you're not familiar with us, we're a membership-based organization whose mission is to advance community-based research excellence in Canada by strengthening partnerships, building capacity, mobilizing knowledge, and championing community-based research among individuals, communities, and institutions. We are a social enterprise. We're funded by over 40, I think it's over 50 or even 60 now, institutional members. And as part of the program that we offer to our members, we host monthly events now, like our e-learning series that you're joining today, as well as a community of practice. You can find information about our upcoming events, as well as event recordings, summary graphics, and things like that on our website. And my colleague Isabella, who's here with me today, will put that link in the chat for everyone. We acknowledge that the CBRCanada Secretariat is situated on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we open each of our e-learning events by reflecting on and amplifying the goals of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action. So this month, we'll be hearing a presentation that's really about youth innovation, youth entrepreneurship, and this theme of kind of nothing about us without us, which I believe was kind of first seen in Indigenous literature writing about Indigenous involved research. So what came to mind to me was call to action number 7. We call upon the federal government to develop with Indigenous or Aboriginal groups a joint strategy to eliminate educational and employment gaps between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians. So one of the calls that really highlights this idea of nothing about us without us and doing things jointly in partnership with Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Today, I'll be facilitating this event. We encourage you throughout the event, if you have any questions that come to your mind during the presentation portion, please type them in the chat at any time. Our presentation from our presenters today will be about 20 to 30 minutes, after which we'll have a question and answer period. That question and answer period, the first thing I'll do is go to the chat, see if any questions have already come in throughout the presentation, and we'll start with those. Or if you're still kind of muddling questions around in your brain, you can get them in the chat box when we get to that Q&A period. I will ask folks to please keep their microphones muted throughout the presentation, just to prevent any potential background noise and ensure we can hear the speakers nice and clearly. You're welcome to turn your cameras on if you'd like, particularly when we get to that question and answer period. It can be nice to see each other's faces. You would have gotten the notification already that our event today is being recorded, and it will be available on our website after the fact as well. So if you miss parts of today's event, or you think of other people who would be interested in this, you are welcome to share the event link with them so folks can watch this video recording after the fact. I am so honored to be introducing today's presenters, 3 wonderfully inspiring people. First, Ilona Dougherty, the Managing Director and co-creator of the Youth Innovation Project at the University of Waterloo. Ilona is an award-winning social innovator with extensive leadership and governance experience, and she's co-founded several successful organizations, such as Apathy is Boring, a nonpartisan social enterprise that educates Canadian youth about democracy and encourages them to vote. Which she actually created when she was a youth or young adult herself. Ilona is a PhD student in political science at the University of Waterloo, a speaker with the Speaker Spotlight Agency, and an Ashoka Fellow. We also have Ellen Tam with us today. Ellen is a member of the Youth Advisory Council for the Youth and Innovation Project, as well as a current student of the University of Alberta. Ellen is passionate about social justice and aspires to be a constitutional lawyer in the future. She is the founder of Pegasi, a club that focuses on spreading awareness for social inequities around the world, and a member of Be Beautiful, a girl empowerment group based in Canada. Also with us, Ian Korovinsky, another member of our Youth Innovation Youth Advisory Council, and a student at the University of Waterloo. Ian has been engaged with the student community for the past 5 years, leading youth mental health initiative projects, spearheading financial literacy projects, distributing care packages within the Greater Toronto Area for the homeless or houselessness community. And in Ian's spare time, he likes to volunteer at competitions and learn from other rising figures in youth engagement. So three very inspiring and interesting individuals that I am very glad we get to hear from today. I will, without further ado, pass things over to our three presenters. So we'll just have a bit of a shift here where I will end my screen share, and Ilona, you can start your screen share now.
I was muted. Amazing. After all these years. Anyway, thanks so much, Amanda, for that warm welcome. We're really thrilled to be here, and I'm going to start off with a bit of a kind of data, share a bunch of info with all of you about the Youth and Innovation Project and our youth engagement work, and then Ian and Ellen and I will have a conversation about their experience on the council and what this work looks like in practice. And as we always do with the Youth and Innovation Project, and we encourage, we don't do everything perfectly, so I will be encouraging both Ian and Ellen to share what they love about working with us and also what we can continue to improve, because I think it's important to be candid and transparent that, hey, we are all learning. Awesome. So I'm going to get started with our presentation so that we can get to the fun stuff, the discussion with Ian and Ellen. So as was mentioned, my name is Ilona Dougherty, and I co-created the Youth and Innovation Project, which is a research project based out of the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo with my colleague, Dr. Amelia Clark, who's a full professor at the university. So we are, from the very beginning of the project, we're pretty different when it comes to academia. So Amelia and I have known each other since I was 14 and she was 21, and we were both involved in the youth environmental movement. And she was kind of my mentor, and then we quickly became colleagues and have worked in a variety of capacities together ever since. So when I left Apathy is Boring, the charity that I had founded and ran for 10 years, I really felt like there was still more work I wanted to do around intergenerational collaboration. And Amelia at that point had finished her PhD and was just starting her work at the University of Waterloo. So we decided to continue to do some research together based on both of our own experiences as young leaders, and also where our careers had kind of taken us, that, the perspective we offered now, we wanted to do some research together and keep working together. So we truly co-created the Youth and Innovation Project. So I'm now catching up and in academic terms and doing my PhD finally. But really, this is a co-creation. This project is a co-creation of a practitioner, me, and an academic, but also somebody who has a lot of practical experience working in civil society, working with government. Amelia has done all of those things. So I think the very beginning of our research project, we were looking at it from a different perspective and not from a traditional academic perspective. So 7 years later, which is truly wild that we've been around for 7 years. Our goals with the Youth and Innovation Project are to really understand the positive social, environmental, and economic impact that young people 15 to 25-year-olds are having on organizations, communities, and systems. So we're very, very interested in this systems change kind of perspective. And to use the research findings, so once we better understand, we want to use these research findings to inform youth-focused public policy programs and practices. So our goal is to really make our research rigorous and to make sure that it's, we really aim to publish in academic journals, all that kind of thing, but we also want to make it practical. So we have several program areas that are kind of the core of our work. So our first is our social and environmental impact research. And this work is primarily done with civil society. So one of our key partners right now is the Canadian Wildlife Federation. And what we realized is that when we evaluate youth-led work in community, we very often, like organizations who run youth service and volunteerism programs, very often focus their evaluations on what do young people learn and what skills did they gain through those programs. But very rarely do these organizations, almost never, evaluate the environmental or social impact that young people are having through as a result of the youth-led projects that they're very often running through these programs. So this work is to really measure that social and environmental impact that young people are having through youth service and volunteerism. And also, so our research is always about sharing with the organizations that we're doing work with so that it's kind of a developmental evaluation so that they can continue to improve their work, but then also making sure we're publishing more broadly. Often we'll take data from a number of different organizations and publish that to really kind of capture lessons that are of value to the broader youth sector. Our second piece of work, which I'll actually get into a little bit more detail in a moment, is our economic impact research. And that's really understanding the economic, primarily the economic impact. And I'm just realizing, oh yeah, economic, social, and environmental impact. We certainly want to understand all of those dimensions that young people have as employees. So that's, again, an area that we've identified where young people have the potential to have an impact, and we want to really study and understand that. So I'll share a little bit more about our biggest research study right now that is under that heading in a moment. And then lastly, we, as I mentioned, really want to make sure that we're using our insights to advise civil society, government, and business. We've worked really closely with Environment and Climate Change Canada and their Youth Council. We have also worked with Employment and Social Development Canada, helping to design the Canada Service Corps. We've worked with a variety of nonprofits across the country, and as I'll speak about in a moment, we work a lot with quite a number of corporate foundations and also private family foundations. So what I want to share with you is two projects, just to give you a sense of the kind of research work that our Youth Advisory Council works with us very closely on. So I'm going to share these two projects. Then I'm going to get into kind of how our Youth Advisory Council has been running over the last, it's been kind of 4 years that we've had a Youth Advisory Council, and then what the future looks like, because we certainly, again, are always learning. And in the last year, as Ellen and Ian know, we've been less structured in our work with the Youth Advisory Council, sort of engaging the Youth Council members on a little more of an ad hoc basis as we transition into a new model, which I'm excited to share with all of you, because this is not something we have shared really at all. We are about to launch this in September. We're pretty excited about it. So just to give you a sense of some of the research projects that our Youth Advisory Council has worked on with us, the first one I want to share a little bit about is the RBC Future Launch Longitudinal Study. So RBC is the bank. They have a foundation, and the kind of one of the key programs of that foundation over the last number of years, since 2017, I believe, has been RBC Future Launch. So this is a $500 million commitment to the issue of youth employment and youth unemployment in Canada. And they fund hundreds of grantees across Canada, everybody from folks like, gosh, I can't, stuff around youth mental health, organizations that work with youth mental health. They also fund programs in universities. They fund all sorts of different programs, obviously internship programs, skills development programs that will support young people in transitioning to, as they talk about, kind of the future of work or thriving at work. And so they brought us on to be the longitudinal study partner for this study. So the question that we are asking in this study are, what are the impacts of RBC funded programs on young participants in the Canadian economy? And then we ask a number of sub-questions around, are young people employed after they've finished the program, whatever the program is that they've been a part of? Is there additional training that they've completed? Are they thriving at work? And how are the outcomes different based on different diversity characteristics? So again, the study took us 2.5 years to design. It's very complex, so I'm not going to get into a huge amount of detail, but I want to just give you a general overview. So the way the study works is when a young person gets involved in an RBC funded program, they finish the program, they have an opportunity to complete a post-program evaluation that RBC, or that the partners, that the funded partners share with the young people. As a part of that post-program evaluation, they have an opportunity to opt into our study. They then, a year after, they will get the first survey from our study. 2 years after, they'll get the second. 3 years after, they'll get the third. And then after the third year, there'll be an opportunity for folks to opt into an interview, and we'll interview a selection of folks. So we did a pilot study to test a bunch of things around this, particularly incentive, branding, and messaging for this study. We started collecting data in May 2023, and we'll continue till 2028. We have we have over 21,000, but just under 22,000 young people who've opted into the study. And so far for the study, we're in the first survey wave, but we have a 20% response rate. So we're really, really thrilled about that. So this is the kind of research work, it's big and it's complex, that our youth council has been very closely involved in supporting us in developing this study. So everything from advising us on the questionnaire. Did it make sense? Did they understand the questions? Were they youth friendly? You know, like, what did we get right? What did we get wrong? Are we asking questions that don't make sense? For a young person's experience. Also advising us on incentives. What incentives should we be offering? So for this study, we offer a $10 e-transfer for a completed survey. So advising us on that, advising us on messaging and branding, so that we really make sure that this study is compelling and we get the highest response rate possible. So we'll share, Ian and Ellen can share more about their individual experience advising on this study. But I just wanted to give you, again, a sense of a couple of the studies that they've worked on with us. So the second project is the Ashoka Academy Collaborative for Youth Allyship. And the question, so this was a 2-year-long research project that we've just wrapped up, and I can share the link to the report in the chat. So this was a collaborative between 7 private and corporate family foundations, philanthropic foundations of Canada, Ashoka Canada, and ourselves at the University of Waterloo. And we were asking the question, how can Canadian foundations best support youth-led civil society organizations and youth movements to have an impact on social and environmental issues? So this was foundations that came to us wanting to answer this question, and we both did a research process as well as facilitated an engagement process between young leaders and the foundations in order to develop this report and a series of recommendations that we are now in the midst of working on implementing. So as part of this research project, we conducted a systematic literature review. We also did a broad search, gray and academic literature, And then we also wanted to, in our work, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, our work, what we really try to do is both make sure we look at the literature, and then also make sure that youth voice is really paired with that, right? So what do we know from the evidence, and then what do we know from lived experience, and how do we put those two things together? So we also wanted to interview young leaders, but we wanted to make sure we were getting out of our networks in order to identify who these young leaders were. So we did a media search. We identified through that media search 177 Canadian young leaders who are doing incredible work on a variety of different issues, and we interviewed 16 of them. And both the data from the literature review and from the research was involved, or from the interviews was involved in our report. So we had our Youth Advisory Council involved in developing interview questions, looking at the research questions. We also had a member, Sana, who was involved in some of the, once we had the report, some of the engagement activities that we led between young people and foundations. So we brought together 7 young people who had been interviewed together with the foundation leaders. We spent a day talking about the report. What did we get wrong? What did we get right? What was phrased well? What wasn't? And Sana, who is one of our Youth Advisory Council members, was involved in that day and that process. So out of that collaborative day-long session where we really pressure tested the report to make sure that it resonated, we then developed recommendations that were kind of co-developed by the young people and the foundation leaders, and we're now in the midst of working with several foundations and all of those 7 young leaders from this project in implementing those recommendations. So this just gives you, I wanted to kind of give you a flavor and some examples about the kind of research that we're doing, the scale of research we're doing, and just a little bit about how the Youth Advisory Council is involved. So I'm going to share a little more about how we do the work we do. Then I'm going to share a little more detail about the structure of the Youth Advisory Council, and then I'll hand it over to Ian and Ellen to share their personal experience of being on the Youth Council. So with youth engagement work, what you're doing is maybe not even half of the battle. How we do the work we do. And I mean, this is true for all of the work we do, but I think even more so with youth engagement work is really critical. So we have a series of values that we developed as part of our strategic planning process a number of years ago. I haven't included them all because literally they're a very long list, but these are some key values that speak to centering youth engagement in our work and kind of how we view it. So we view young people as equal and active collaborators in our work, which means that young people need to benefit from this work. So I'll speak a little bit about some of the changes we're making now and why we sort of restructured our youth engagement work that will speak to how we want to ensure that young people benefit more from our work, and that also young people are being compensated fairly for their work. So we have a commitment that we can't always quite meet due to funding restrictions, but we are actually now much more consistently meeting it than we ever have, which is we want to pay young people a living wage for their work with us. So the living wage in Canada is ballpark around $23 an hour. And so even if a young person, again, fills out a survey, so our surveys, our RBC survey is about 15 minutes to fill out, we're paying them $10, right? So we want to pay them at least, if not more than the living wage for the amount of time that they're working with us. So we really recognize the importance of lived experience. Again, evidence is great, it's important, but we also need to pressure test that and really make sure that we're including youth voice. And so we always pair those two things. We also make sure that in addition to making sure the young people who work with us have a sense of agency, that they also have both financial and process-based support to be engaged in our work. So whether that's meeting one-on-one and talking about, hey, what's working, what's not, like how can we make this process better? It's also about if a young person does additional work with us, they will get paid for that work. So we are thrilled to be able to be providing an honorarium for Ellen and Ian to join us today. And that's something, I'm getting paid from my job to be here. So why shouldn't the young people who join me today get paid as well? So that's definitely part of our philosophy. Another big part, and this is the hard stuff, is recognizing biases and challenging them. Ageism, when it comes to both elders and young people in our society, is a bias that is not often kind of understood and deconstructed. The World Health Organization released a report on ageism a couple of years ago, and it's really fascinating in terms of the impact that ageism has on young people and on young people's lives. So we work really hard to recognize that this work will make us, as in the adults involved, feel uncomfortable, and that we need to be open to feeling uncomfortable and feeling challenged through this work. So we also know that we work in the context of a university, which, holy moly, when we're talking about youth engagement, is extremely complex, and that there's a lot of power and a lot of hierarchy. And, we need to acknowledge the spaces that our work takes place in, and really actively try to address some of those power imbalances that are happening around us. So how do we model in our team, that we're willing to be uncomfortable, we're willing to recognize power and privilege, and then how do we model, share that beyond our team throughout the university? And just as important with all of that is prioritizing health and well-being of our team. So we have a staff team of 4. We have 3 RAs who are working with us. So we usually have about 3 RAs every semester, research assistants every semester. And then obviously our team includes our Youth Advisory Council and several academics. We have quite a number of academics who work with us closely in addition to Amelia. So a little bit about our methodology. So we believe in nothing without us, about us without us, sorry. So we engage the Youth Advisory Council and other young stakeholders throughout the designing and implementing our studies. I'll talk in a moment about publication. We're really working hard to make sure that we are engaging young people in publication. We haven't done as great a job as we want to on that, but we are working hard to change that. Then we work to gain a broad understanding. So as I mentioned, conduct literature reviews, other scans. Our work is very interdisciplinary. Amelia's background is management, mine is political science. We work with an economist, we work with a psychologist, we work with all sorts of different folks. So we bring that interdisciplinary perspective to our work. We use a mix of then quantitative and qualitative research methods to gather the data, analyze, and write manuscripts and research reports. But then, as I mentioned, and I think this is sometimes where we differ a little bit from some other research projects, we test our findings. So yes, it's great. This is what the research says, but we all know research can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And those with lived experience, we feel, also need the opportunity to support us in understanding how to frame that research. And then we aim to make a difference. We really want our work to have an impact. So we share our findings broadly with decision makers, and our goal is to change policy and resource flows. So I come from a social innovation background, and that's really what we're trying to do here. Systems change, social innovation. It's all about money and power and changing who gets those things. Okay, so quickly, because again, I want to get to the good stuff here. Our Youth Advisory Council, how do we actually structure this and how do we engage our members? So In 2019, we held an in-person retreat. Our plan was that we would do one every year. We haven't held one since. We're going to be holding one this fall, which we're really thrilled about. So that's been a little bit of a shift. We have managed to do a virtual retreat every year, but it's just not the same. We do also hold monthly virtual meetings, or we have up until this year. Again, this year is a transition year, and I'll be talking about that in a moment. These meetings have had 3 parts: a check-in. How's everybody doing? Let's just, check in and just see how we're doing. A feedback session, which is providing feedback on our research, and then a training session. So there's always those 3 elements. It's a 2-hour call. We've really worked hard because we haven't been able to do in-person retreats to make sure people have real things that they can hold that make them feel connected to us. So whether that's a welcome package when folks join the council, sometimes we've done holiday packages or thank you packages, variety of things. Again, cards, we're really big on handwritten cards to make sure that folks feel supported. We are currently paying $500 a year for the honorarium for being part of the council. We also provide additional honorariums for individual work. So we have a $250 honorarium if someone leads a training session or does an individual piece of work with us. And then it's based on kind of, again, an hourly rate of living based on the living wage for other kind of work. We do one-on-one check-ins with each council member each year. So again, really important to be developing those one-on-one relationships. We provide individual support as needed. So it could be reference letters, that kind of thing. And we really make sure that we're asking regularly how folks are feeling about their engagement with the council and how it is run. So as I mentioned, folks, the Youth Council advises us on research design, questionnaires, surveys, how to reach study participants, messaging and branding, and a lot more. But basically, we found the most useful advice to get is concrete advice that relates to how young study participants are going to experience the study. And then also on how we interpret the results. That has been really, really helpful and like so game-changing for our work. So lastly, I want to share before we chat, I would like to just share a little bit about where we're going. So as I mentioned, we've had our youth council for just 3 to 4 years, and it's been great. It's super fun. Again, we gain a huge amount from it. We've gotten really great feedback. And again, I'm excited to hear what Ellen and Ian have to say, but we've been getting really great feedback from the young people who've been involved. We stay quite engaged with our alumni from the council. We also had great folks show up for our monthly meetings, which is really great, and are super engaged with in them. Ellen, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to share a story about how Ellen participated in one of our monthly meetings from a competition that she was participating in, like on the court, the badminton court, as I recall. So our youth members go above and beyond to make sure that they're at our meetings, which is super awesome. But we know that we have more to do. So where are we, or how are we evolving our work? So the first thing is we've just developed a collaborative publication process where we're going to be meaningfully engaging co-authors, young people as co-authors. So that could be research assistants who did some of the data analysis or study design as part of their studies. How do we re-engage them and pay them? Very important, pay them to be co-authors. Also, we are going to be working to engage our Youth Advisory Council as co-authors. So there's been a lot of interest in this. We just actually received some funding to test this out. There are going to be bumps in the road, but it's a very engaged process where we don't want to just kind of slap young people's names on a paper. We want to make sure that they really believe in what the paper says, and we're going to engage them in data analysis and then the final review of the paper. So I'm really excited about that, and would love to hear any thoughts from folks who have engaged young people as co-authors on publications. So we're working hard to develop that framework. We also have decided, and hence this year is really a shift in the Youth Council, to shift to an intergenerational council. So our work is very much about intergenerational collaboration. It's from the perspective of young people, because often in the workplace and in organizations, young people tend to be the ones without as much power. Certainly elders at the far end of the age spectrum don't have a lot of power, but kind of with that middle cohort of adults tend to have more power. And so we focus on bringing young people into decision-making spaces, but we really don't believe in kind of putting a youth council over here, saying, there, youth council, thank you for your advice. Great. And then they kind of never hear from us again, and they don't actually engage in any of the real decisions. And we realized that in order to really fully experience, fully embody that principle, that we think actually it's better to have an intergenerational council rather than just a youth council. So starting in September, we're going to have a council that has about 50% young people, and then 50% former young leaders and decision makers. Now, the plan is that the young people on the council will continue to meet monthly. We'll have additional support, kind of wraparound support. And then we will have everybody meet about 4 times a year. And we're going to launch it all with an in-person retreat, which is really exciting. So again, we're trying this out. We're going to make lots of mistakes. But I think bringing young people into the room with decision makers, making sure everybody has the training, and we are going to do this because this is one of the things we make sure we think is really important to do, make sure we're training the decision makers to really understand how to work with young people is going to be really important as well. So how do we bring everybody into the same room and have hard conversations and make decision makers feel uncomfortable, and hopefully, get to a point where we're really effectively collaborating. So I'm going to leave it at that because I've been talking way too much. I'm going to leave this slide up for a moment. If you're interested in following our work, feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm accessible and available. I'm more than happy to chat anytime. And now I want to hand it over to Ian and Ellen. I'd love for you both to share what has been the good parts of your experience with the council, what has been some of the things that are more challenging that maybe you want to encourage us to improve. And is there any other kind of youth engagement experiences you've had in your school or work life that you would like to share about? So I will hand it over to you, and we'll just have a conversation. Who wants to jump in? Ian, go for it.
Sure. I can jump in first. I think one of the really, really nice things about the youth council has been that like when you do provide feedback, it's not that you, Ilona, as you mentioned earlier, it's not that you provide feedback and then never gets seen again. I remember that, for example, when the RBC project was kind of like the main focus, it was like, you'd give feedback and you hear about it at a couple of monthly meetings in a row. So it's like, you give feedback and then you see how it's processed and implemented, and then you see it again, and then you kind of see the changes. So that's a really nice thing. It's not that you're, just providing feedback and then there's no follow-up. It's there's so much follow-up that, you see how your efforts are being valued, but more so how, what you're doing is directly impacting, the way a project moves forward. I would say it's also really, really nice to have mentorship opportunities, especially within, councils, especially since there is the opportunity not just to learn about the ongoing projects, but because there is a segment where, you do get, training in other aspects, more so even growing as a person, growing in general life. It's really nice to have it be there, not only as an engagement, but also as a community. It's been, really, really nice aspects of the council.
For me, I think I've told Ilona this many times, but compared to the other youth councils I've been on, or clubs that try and engage youth. I feel like Youth Advisory Council is like the one where our opinions are actually really incorporated. And not only that, I feel like they take us seriously and we're treated as equals, as though our opinions like actually hold weight and it's not just something that they're doing to like look better on paper. And also I really love, again, like I think Ian mentioned this, the mentorship aspect of it, as well as everything we like the give and take of it. Obviously, like we're helping by giving our opinions on like these research papers, but in return, we're also getting a lot of advice on how to like continue in our careers or our academic careers and things like that. I do remember on like a survey we did at the end of the year where it was like, what aspects could they improve on? I said that I wanted to be like more engaged in like the actual like research making process, which like just based off what Ilona just announced, clearly they're being incorporated, and that's just like another example of how our opinions actually matter to them and how they're listening to what we're saying and incorporating it into the future. So yeah, overall, I just really love this experience.
Thanks so much to both of you. And I just maybe if you'd be open to sharing more generally, like either experiences with the Youth Advisory Council or with other youth engagement, like maybe your top 2 tips, like what's really, really important when folks are thinking about engaging youth, and what's one thing to avoid that you would say, is kind of a stumbling block that people kind of get caught in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have a couple of interesting takes on this. I think the first very, very important thing to have is very, very, like clear communication. Because when things are more or less ambiguous, like when you're setting times to meet like very, very soon before they actually happen, because there isn't a lot of communication, I feel like a lot of young people do lose interest because simply there's so many things in the world around you and there's so much to explore. It's a little difficult when the communication isn't being put forward. And especially when you do start to engage people, like for example, like students, because students are typically very busy, like constantly studying. It is like a lot of pressure on them to continue to stay engaged. And I think that really becomes difficult. So I think the first main thing is to really, really communicate. I think that's a really nice thing to have, because I think a lot of students, really do appreciate that. Just they do want to participate, but when things do come up on a crunch and there's already a lot of stuff like, midterms, exams, whatnot, it does become, difficult to incorporate into your lifestyle. The second thing is, and I feel like this is, really being well done by actually incorporating the feedback from the council, but also, an opportunity for in-person connection. I feel like, be staying online, it is sometimes a little bit difficult to connect, but even having those, little things during meetings, where you're checking in on each other, or even having opportunities for in-person retreats, like stuff like that is good because it makes it feel a lot more than, just an engagement. It does make it feel like a community and not just like a place where, you're voicing your opinions and it's very formal, but because you do have all of these different opportunities to connect, you also feel a lot more comfortable, because, as youth, sometimes it can be, difficult, to say, you fully your opinions because you don't know whether or not it will be fully appreciated. But just knowing that, like, that connection is there, that openness is there, by really allowing youth, like, setting up an environment where they can truly give, all their opinions, the feedback you get also does become a lot more natural, and hence that leads it to being a lot more valuable. And I think that, maybe the one thing to avoid, and I think this really, ties in well with a couple of the things that were said earlier, but I think maybe like the one thing to avoid, just bouncing off a little bit off, like, point one, is, leaving a lot of ambiguity. It's nice to have like, what's happening ahead of time, not only in the structure of perhaps, when the meetings are taking place, but what is happening during meeting? Like, how are you engaging? The one of the really nice things about the council was that, agenda was sent out, like, far in advance. So, like, what to expect, right? So, when you come and that there's, maybe like a small reading you had to do ahead of time, or, a few updates on key projects happening. And then, when you go in, you're already ready to give feedback because you already have context. But by kind of leaving that ambiguity in the air, it's especially when you're asking people to provide feedback, on a project they may have, like just seen as, you pitched it to them 10 minutes ago. It is a lot more difficult when perhaps, they read it a couple of nights ago and they've really thought over it. Like the feedback you'll get, I think, is a lot more interesting and a lot more natural.
Go ahead.
For just, I'll start with like stumbling points that I don't think are like useful for engaging youth. It's like I think passive work. So things where we can't see the results of what we're doing, or things where I guess people, the youth on the council aren't held accountable in a sense. Because I do have experience where like when I join certain councils, it feels like we're not actually doing work that is meaningful, or something where I know a lot of members, they would like not be held accountable for taking responsibility for their actions, and then they just don't do it, or they slowly lose interest because there's really no urgency. It's where it's like they're just doing something not for the fun of it, but just like to have something on their resume and something that they're not really engaged in. And so I feel like that's something that's like definitely holding back a lot of clubs and communities that are trying to engage youth, because they don't really see their impact as well. It's like they're not actually engaged. And then something that I think that will help engage youth more is like, of course, the first thing is like being comfortable with like the mentors and people who are leading it, because obviously having a good relationship with people who are leading it and you're being comfortable with asking questions is very vital, because obviously, like Ian mentioned, for communication, it's important to like be clear on these things, and you can't have it unless you're comfortable with people who are leading it. And a second thing that I think is really important is being connected to like the other youth on the council as well, which I think this group has done really well, because like obviously like me and Ian, like we chat sometimes on Instagram, but like just learning from others and being able to talk to other people as well. So we have those breakout rooms that we do, and then I get to learn from like people who are older than me, like Mishika and things like that, which are really important. And just be this kind of just incorporates like the whole community aspect of it, which is also really important for engaging.
Awesome. So just a couple of things that I realized I didn't mention that we do. So we do the like buddies. So when a new person joins the council, they will meet one-on-one with another council member to kind of get to know each other. So that is important. And I also just wanted to mention that both Ian and Ellen joined the council when they were in high school. So we also really encourage and make sure that we engage younger youth. So our demographic that we research and study is 15 to 25, and we make sure that we're really engaging that entire demographic, and it's been going really well. So last question for both of you, and then I don't know if there's any questions in the chat, or Amanda, if you have any other questions for us that you want to share, but maybe I'll ask, what is the thing you're most proud of having done with the Youth Advisory Council? Or what's something that stands out to you as something, yeah, that you're proud of having been a part of?
I think the Oh, sorry, I think I hit mute. But one of the first things that comes to mind, and although this wasn't like one of the super big focuses we had throughout the year, but I think just like the Ashoka report was, one thing that I know being really, really proud of. I remember like, the report was huge and there was a lot of information there, but just being able to go through it, being able to give feedback, like just going through that, and then, seeing a couple months later, like, when it was published, just being able to see like, all the feedback that you gave, it's like incorporated. And it's not only, things that you mentioned, but, things that others also said, because we do see changes in the report, right? And, they don't come out of thin air. So seeing that, the changes or the feedback that you gave is really being combined with, a lot of what other people said, and really, seeing that culminating when you do see, like a rough draft of something, and then it comes up with like a really, really nice final draft. I think it was really, really nice to see. I think because this was like one of the first bigger things that we did, throughout the council, and it was near the start of the year. But, also being able to see like, through the different, stages of the project, as it was happening, especially, with when the report was being written, just kind of being there throughout that whole process, and then seeing that all culminating in the end was, I don't know, it was a really, really nice experience.
I feel like my proudest moment was probably somewhere towards the beginning, because I remember like the first few meetings, I was feeling kind of like overwhelmed with everything, because everyone just seems like so much more experienced than me, especially like the older kind of youth members, because they had like research experience and things. But I wasn't sure. I think it was like a survey we sent out, and then I emailed probably Valentina after about how like the timing of when the surveys are sent out really affects how high school students kind of react to it, because like obviously with exams and everything, and their perspective of like their career will change. And so I remember pointing that out, and I think that was like a contribution I was really proud of, and it was like the first thing where I was like, oh, I'm actually like making a difference here. So yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, we just love having both of you on the youth council. We're so excited to kind of relaunch and to engage both you folks and all our other youth council members and new folks in this work. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. It's great to see both your faces. Ellen, I wish you were closer so we would get to see you more often. But we'll get you to the in-person retreat soon. Awesome. So Amanda, maybe I'll hand things back over to you.
Yeah, thank you. This is really valuable to hear that kind of conversation between the three of you and Ellen and Ian, hear your experiences. I haven't seen any questions come in the chat yet, so we have about 5 minutes left for question and answer before we start to wrap things up today. So please, if you do have a question, get it in the chat box and we'll answer as many as we can in that time. But I have, I guess, one more question that came to mind for me when Ilona, you were asking your questions to Ellen and Ian, especially considering that you two both joined the youth council when you were still in high school. So I guess what was your motivation, or when you first heard about this youth advisory council, what intrigued you, or what made you decide to join in a research project? I know you both had lots of experiences as youth leaders, but what I guess engaged you or piqued your interest in terms of being involved in a research project?
Yeah, I think from the very, very start, I think the impression that was given off, especially, as you're going through all the different interview processes, as you're learning more and more about the council, it was, very clear cut from the start that, this is like a very serious opportunity. It's an opportunity to, get engaged, but it's also not something else that, you typically see in high school, because I feel like in high school, especially as youth, like because there are a lot of other youth-led organizations around you, you really get the opportunity to engage in that. And that was great. But I think with the council, there was an opportunity to do something different. It was kind of an opportunity where maybe you're not doing as much of, the hands-on work as you would in a youth-led organization, like, running events, running webinars. You're not doing that kind of work, but it's more so that you're providing feedback, which is equally as valuable, especially, still being in a high school. It's not as often that, high school students do get to provide feedback as opposed to perhaps university students, because when you are in university, there are a lot more like, surveys and, feedback forms being sent out. But just really this opportunity that, even though, you're still in high school, like, your opportunities are valued. And, it was something that was taken seriously. I feel like that was, just from the start, something, piqued, at least personally, my interest, and, really gave, a good standing going forward.
Thanks for sharing, Ian.
I think for me, just like when I first heard about it, I went on the Youth and Innovation website, and just learning more about the project, it seemed like something that was really interesting, because obviously, like, as someone who's been very engaged in like youth activism, it would be really interesting to like study the effects of it and the actual impact that youth will have. And so I just really wanted to join the project and be a part of something that was clearly very big and very important. So yeah.
Oh, thanks for sharing, Ellen. That's neat. So it sounds like it was, something different than your past experiences and something that really intrigued you, kind of to continue learning and growing. And we have one question that's come in the chat by Shamina, and I echo the sentiment, just being amazed by the vastness of this project. I think a lot of the kind of youth engaged research projects we've shared so far in the series were, small scale, very community driven, community specific. And what you're doing is happening on such a larger scale, yet still embodying these community-based research perspectives. So that is a really neat example to see. The question Shamina had was, could you tell us about the inclusion-exclusion criteria of participants involved in the surveys and the interviews that were a part of your project?
Yeah, absolutely. So each research project, we have different inclusion and exclusion criteria. So I would encourage you, for the Ashoka project, the report was shared in the chat. So I'd encourage you there's the methodology in there that will speak to that. Most of our other work is in partnership with organizations that have youth programs. So for example, to be in the RBC study, those 22,000 young people have to have participated in a program that was funded by RBC Future Launch. So we partner with youth organizations that are running youth programs, and then their young people who are part of their programs become part of our study. So there's no kind of inclusion or exclusion criteria beyond that. And the same goes for our work with the Canadian Wildlife Federation. So the young people who are part of our studies are part of their programs. So we don't do any direct recruitment for our studies. It's through partner organizations. So yeah, a different model, I think, than a lot of youth-focused research. It's very much a partnership model.
That's neat. And that shows, I think, kind of the community-driven nature of it as well, when you have these partnership organizations coming to you and wanting to partner for research.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, the fact that I come from having founded a charity and led a charity for a long time, that helps in providing that sense of that we get it, that the Youth and Innovation Project, aren't scary academics, not that, anyway, there could be that perception, but that we really understand the practice side of things and are gonna support it.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And we are running out of time here, so I will wrap things up. One thing we can do as well is when we share the webinar recording on our website, we can share a link to that Ashoka report right on our website as well. So folks, if you've missed the link in the chat, you'll see it there. So I'll jump back to a couple just wrapping up slides that I have here as we end out today. As I'm just talking about our recordings, and this shows you where you can find them on our website under the resources tab. And my colleague Isabella can put the link in the chat for the URL. We would love for all of you to stay in touch with us if you're not already. So you can sign up for our e-newsletter where you'll hear about our upcoming events, our community of practice, training, workshop opportunities, anything like that, as well as news from our member organizations that they share with us. So Isabella will put that link in the chat as well. The next event we have coming up in this series, happening next month in April, is called Centering Youth Voice Through Arts-Based Evaluation of the Wise Guys program. So for anyone who's kind of been following CBRCanada, this Wise Guys program was an award winner of our national awards last year for having a great community campus partnership and a great emerging community-based researcher working on the project. So we'll be highlighting that project in their models for engaging youth in the evaluation of a youth-driven program. And lastly, we love to hear your feedback about these sessions. So we have a very quick feedback form. It's a couple questions asking about if there's anything you'd like us to change and how we run these events, as well as asking your feedback on any upcoming topics you'd like us to explore in our e-learning series. So that feedback form, you can scan that QR code on the screen, or Isabella has put the link to that in the chat for you all as well. So that wraps up our session today. A huge thank you to Ilona and Ellen and Ian for sharing your experiences, for sharing about the projects and the model that your center uses for engaging youth in your research. Thank you for everyone who attended today, listened, anyone who shares this link afterwards to help it reach more people. Thank you so much for your engagement, your involvement, and especially those that we see back here, event after event. It's wonderful to see familiar names in the chat. So thank you once again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.